We're dealing with vows where language may be not quite accurate, and that makes the vow invalid. That's really the substance of the second chapter of Nedarim, where we're dealing with precision in language. And then the chapter is going to conclude, the whole of the second chapter will conclude with language which the sayer of the vow actually intends to be imprecise. And we'll see that the sages don't like this. Nadar b'cherem, so he vowed by a cherem. Now, if you say something is like a cherem, that is a valid vow because it's something which is dedicated to God. So you can say, this loaf of bread is going to be like a cherem, i.e., I'm not going to eat it. But then he seems to retract himself. So Nadar b'cherem, he vowed by a cherem, and then he said, Lo nadarti eila b'charmo shel yam. I only vowed by the cherem of the sea. And I think in one of the prophets, the word cherem is used for a net, a fisherman's net. So in other words, this vow doesn't have any meaning, or that's what he says afterwards. He's clearly he's messing around. He's messing around with language. Nadar b'korban, he vowed by a korban. Well, we know this is valid language. If I say this loaf of bread is going to be for me like a korban, I can't eat it. And then he says, Ve'amar, lo nadarti eila korbanot malachim. I only vowed by gifts given to kings. We can say, a korban is a sacrifice, but we can also say it's a gift given to a king. So I didn't really mean a holy object. Hare atzmi korban. Behold, I myself am a korban. Now you can dedicate yourself to the temple, and there's a whole, there's the whole Mishnah of Arachin, and there's a whole chapter in Vayikra about how you value people who dedicate themselves to the Beit Mikdash. So you can do that. So he says, I, atzmi. Atzmi is a word for me. But hang on, etzem can also mean a bone. Ve'amar, so harei atzmi korban. Below, I myself am a korban. Ve'amar, and then he says, lo nadarti, eila be'etzem shehinachti li liot noderbo. I only vowed by this etzem, this bone, which I actually keep for the purpose of vowing, i.e., I always make these declarations, which I don't intend to keep. And I've got a bone sitting on my shelf in my house, which I keep just for this purpose. Or maybe he says, kunam. Remember, kunam is an abbreviation, a nickname for korban. So he's used valid language here. Yeah. Kunam, ishti neheneti. Kunam, be any benefit my wife has from me, i.e., he's forbidding his wife to have any benefit from him. We're saying that's just like a korban. Which, and this is grounds for, this is very serious, actually, because if it lasts more than, I think, a few weeks, well, it's a dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. But it's grounds for a divorce after a very short time. And then he changes his mind. He says, Ve'amar, lo nadarti eila meishti harishona shegerashti. I spoke only about my first wife, whom I'm divorced from, who I divorced. So he's not really talking about his wife. He's talking about his previous wife. And you can imagine, we don't like this. So on all of these, they shouldn't inquire. That is, they shouldn't inquire about them. That means, in the language of the Mishnah, they shouldn't inquire of a sage in order to break the vow. Ve'im nishalin. Now we're going to hear Rabbi Meir. Ve'im nishalin, if they do inquire of a sage to break the vow, that means effectively they seem to think that there's power in this meaningless vow. So not only are they taking the whole process of vowing not seriously, but they don't understand. They don't even understand that what they've said is meaningless. So they're, if you like, their ignoramus is at two levels. If they do go and consult a sage about this meaningless vow, which they've deliberately made meaningless, on shin utam, If they inquire about them, they're punished. This is the words of Rabbi Meir. Umachmirin alehem. They're punished and they're really treated strictly, according to Rabbi Meir. And the commentators will all come and say, obviously, we can't punish them unless they've already broken the vow that they seek to have released. But effectively, if they seek release, we treat them very seriously. That's the essence of the Mishnah, regardless of how you interpret it. The sages are a little bit more lightweight than Rabbi Meir. So the sages say, look, they open an opening for another place. This is code for saying they do release them from the vow. And they teach them. They teach them. They teach them in order that they shouldn't act lightly with vows. So the sages say, no, we don't punish them, but we educate them. Because we really do not want people to behave in this way. Having said that, this is now the opening of the 3rd chapter. There are some kinds of vows which the sages did allow to be kind of automatically annulled. But these are classic situations. Well, let's have a look at these situations. Arba'a Nedarim hitiru chachamim. So 4 types of vows the sages permitted, i.e., they are automatically invalid. Remember, when in the Mishnah of Nedarim we talk about something that's permitted, we mean the vow doesn't hold. The vow doesn't succeed in forbidding. So there are 4 of these categories. And the Mishnah is going to deal, there are now going to be 4 Mishnayot, 1 for each category. So the 4 categories are Nidrei Ziruzin, vows of urging. If I want to urge you to do something, I say, gosh, well, you must do this for me. And we'll explain this in a minute. Nidrei Havai, vows which are just exaggeration, which are just over the top. Nidrei Shkagot, vows made in error. Venidrei Anasin, vows made under duress. So we're going to say actually that these 4 types of vows don't hold at all. So this is rather than the sayer saying something really stupid so as not to tie himself up. The sages are saying, look, in these situations, we will make sure that you don't tie yourself up. And the Mishnah is going to now go through each one of those. Nidrei Ziruzin, vows of urging. Let's have a look at this. So someone's selling something. He's selling an object in the marketplace and he says, kunam. That's code word for korban. Kunam, I'm not going to reduce the price for you below a seller. And a seller is 2 dinars. A seller is 4 dinars. 4 dinars, 2 shekalim. V'hala omer, and the other one says, Kunam she'eni mosif lecha ala shekel. Kunam, I won't increase for you more than a shekel. A shekel is 2 dinars. So they're both, I won't say taking the name of the Lord in vain, because they're using hyperbole. They're using this expression kunam for korban. I mean, you can see now why the sages would rather the use of nicknames for these oaths, because people are very loose in their language here. And what both of them mean really is they're prepared to settle at 3. Shnehem rotzin b'shlosha dinarim. They both want 3 dinarim. In other words, they both want a shekel and a half. They both want a shekel and a half. But they're expressing that language with language of the vow. And the sages say, look, we're not even going to entertain that this is a vow. This is just hyperbolic language. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov goes on to say, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says also, someone wants to make his friend eat with him. So he makes him subject to a vow. I'm going to make you subject to a vow that you come and eat at my house. This is just, again, is this hyperbole? It doesn't stick. The sages ordain up front, it doesn't stick. And then the Mishnah does something very odd. So he says, someone who wants his friend to eat with him, and he makes him subject to a vow. Ve'amar, and he says, Kol Nidrei shani atid lidor harehu batel ubilvad shehei zechur b'shah neder. And then he says, every vow which I may make in the future shall be void, providing that he remembers this at the time of the vow. Every vow which I may make in the future shall be void. What does this sound like? It sounds like Kol Nidrei. But what's it got to do with someone who wants to make his friend eat with him? And the Gemara actually rewrites this Mishnah and actually puts in a few missing words. So the Gemara is going to rewrite this Mishnah and add a few words, and now it's going to sound like Kol Nidrei. And the Gemara in Nedarim says, Chasore michasre v'hachakatani. It is incomplete. It is certainly incomplete. And this is how the Mishnah should be taught. And now we're going to repeat the Mishnah, but now it's going to make sense. Someone who wants his friend to eat with him and urges him to do so and subjects him to a vow. This vow is called a vow of urging. So this is the kind of vow that just doesn't stick. And someone who desires that his vows should not be upheld for the whole year. He should stand up on Rosh Hashanah and he should say, Kol Nidrei she'ani atid lidor, any vow that I take in the future, Yehei batel, it shall be void. Look, here's the language of Kol Nidrei. And the Mishnah then continues, Ubi levad shehei zachur b'shat neder, providing that he remembers at the time of the vow. It's and we can see the language of Kol Nidrei here. We don't really understand what it is what does he have to remember at the time of the vow? Abaya actually objects. Abaya says, look, if he remembers at the time of the vow that he swore that vows taken should be void, well, clearly, if he's making the vow, then he's now annulling the declaration he made on Rosh Hashanah. If he knows he made that declaration and then he makes a vow, they can't both live together. So Abaya says, Amar Abaya, Tani, let it be taught, let the Mishnah teach. Abaya said, let it be taught, let the Mishnah teach, providing he does not remember at the time of the vow. In other words, you can stand up on Rosh Hashanah. You can say, any vow that I take in the future shall be void, providing that you're not thinking about it, providing you're not like promising with your fingers crossed behind your back, providing that you don't remember this explicitly at the time you make the vow. And the Rambam actually will come with another explanation. The Rambam doesn't like adulterating the Mishnah, and he says, no. What it means is that a second after you make the vow, you need to remember, oh yeah, I made the declaration on Rosh Hashanah. So there are two ways of reading this, and both are in harmony in the sense that the Rambam seems to agree with Abaya and seems to agree with the sense of the Mishnah as it's interpreted by the Gemara, that it is possible. It is possible to stand up and say, look, any vow that I take in the future shall be void. And the Chazal, the sages seem to be okay with that. But then we already know that the sages don't like vows. So we could imagine actually that they would like some mechanism to stop all vows having any force at all.